each other's lonely nights, be each other's paradise. Need a picture for my frame, someone to share my ring. Tell me what you wanna drink, I tell you what I got in mind. Oh, I don't know your name, but I feel that's gonna change.
Good day. I think we are now alive and ready to start this Finance in Common Summit thematic session on the agricultural and planet nexus. I am Gilles Kleitz. I am from the French Development Agency, and I will be facilitating our session today. And I thank again IFAD and AFD to have organized this session. So our short session today is looking at a very big question: achieving the triple bottom line of ensuring agricultural production for a healthy diet for all, diminishing the food system carbon footprint on the planet, and ensuring the preservation of our precious natural ecosystems. This triple bottom line is really what we are aiming at. The bad news at the moment is that agriculture and food systems correspond to 1/4 of all human greenhouse gas emissions, especially through inputs, deforestation, and they are as well the first cause of biodiversity loss, especially through natural habitat loss. The good news on the other side is that we are here to talk about solutions and how to promote, deploy, and especially finance those solutions. A recent article in the Science Journal actually proposed a model to really find the best possible options for land use planning at national level and regional level, combining agriculture, forest, natural lands and ecosystems, and really pave the way for scenarios to decrease the overall carbon footprint of food system while allowing efficient goals for nutrition and agricultural production. So I think the solutions that are at hand will include obviously agronomy at field level, will include as well spatial management at landscape level or even regional level, and will include as well, of course, better distribution and equality among humans, among societies, and obviously strongly reducing wastage as well, a key importance. And I think other solutions as well to meet this triple bottom line will really mobilize the many varied different types of agriculture, landscapes, and agricultural organizations and markets, as no one model can bring alone a solution to this really difficult nexus. And we have today a really fabulous panel of contributors to help us develop our common vision at a local, national, and global level. So we will start our panel first with Jonathan Davies, Senior Agricultural Advisor at IUCN, and then Estrella Penunia. She's the Secretary General of the Agence Farmer Association for Sustainable Development, and they will both sort of set the scene and the facts. Then we'll talk about metrics through Mr. Nuno Santos from FAO, who will tell us a bit about some tools to measure especially environmental performance of agriculture. And then we'll move to practical examples through Mrs. Rossana Polastri from IFAD. We'll hear as well a video from Gustavo Montezano, the president of BNDES. And then we'll move on to Mariem, Dkhil, and the Crédit Agricole du Maroc, to show examples of how green and inclusive solutions can be financed and deployed. And then we'll have a short Q&A session, and the audience will be able to raise questions as well through the chat box on the Zoom site. So without further ado, let me give the floor to Jonathan Davies from IUCN. Jonathan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Gilles. Thank you for the chance, first of all, to speak here. And set the scene a little bit to start this conversation. I mean, the first question is, why is IUCN, a conservation organization, involved in this conversation today? Essentially, it's that farmland is a modified ecosystem, and that means that farming depends on nature, and the environmental costs of agriculture undermine its own resilience and productivity. And this is particularly true when farming degrades the land itself. So farmers and agribusinesses need to, and I think they increasingly understand the need to invest in biodiversity and land health in particular, because this is their natural capital. Historically, as conservationists, we've not been good enough at monitoring this biodiversity. So I'm interested to hear from partners here about how we're improving metrics for that. For IUCN, the common ground, the point of agreement between conservation and agriculture is these farming practices that restore and maintain land health in the soil and in the surrounding landscape. And this land health is reflected in the richness of soil biodiversity. And this soil biodiversity in turn determines how ecosystems function, how they store and supply water, for example, or how they store carbon, and how they contribute to pest control and many other services to farmers, but to society as a whole. Although these benefits of land health are many, it gets quite complex. The production objectives of farmers and businesses are often much more singular. So if we want to incentivize sustainable farming, we can do it by paying more attention to these values like water supply, like climate regulation and drought resilience, some of these co-benefits, if you like. I mean, a key message for us is that sustainable agriculture has been demonstrated many times to be profitable to farmers and society, but access to appropriate financial services is needed, partly for a kind of leveling of the playing field and particularly to rapidly upscale investments in the capacities and the techniques and the business models that are needed to take a lot of very good practices to the scale that's needed to make significant change. Greater efforts needed to ensure that these financial services reach the ground and can be accessed by poor and marginalized farming communities and groups within those communities, of course. And more investment can particularly be made in local entrepreneurs and local enterprises that are ready to innovate and meet new demands and provide new services within this kind of new space for sustainable agriculture. To promote this, IUCN works with a number of finance companies and governments to develop blended finance mechanisms and other innovations in order to attract the desired investments for land health in the agriculture sector. One challenge we face is measuring success and choosing the right indicators that do justice to the full values of sustainable agriculture. Because if your indicators fail to account for these full range of benefits, then it can lead to the wrong investments or it can make investments look unattractive. Well, now we're developing a land health index to guide investments to capture the complexity of this in a tool that's relatively simple, focusing on functional diversity. So key species in soils that determine ecosystem functions, like the carbon and nitrogen cycle. We're going to be testing that starting early next year with some of our partners. As the biggest global network of conservation organizations, we're accredited to the Global Environment Facility, the Green Climate Fund, and what we're trying to do is use that to demonstrate how sustainable agriculture can be a nature-based solution, something that's profitable to farmers, but provides other benefits to society and leads to a net biodiversity gain, and something that can be delivered at scale. We do this by developing those partnerships that I mentioned and building capacities, helping to create those enabling conditions with governments, with our state members, and then developing the tools to monitor the outcomes. Quick examples, we work in Uganda, for example, with Nespresso on reintroducing agroforestry and coffee production landscapes, Chorus Bank International in Burkina Faso to enable sustainable agriculture around the maize and sorghum value chains. We want to develop and to support the development of more of those kind of partnerships. My final comment is that we really see that this shift is towards enabling these large-scale investments in sustainable agriculture, and it's really urgent if we're serious about transitioning globally to a sustainable food and agriculture sector. The time's right, the practices are known, the interest, the willingness is increasingly there, and the time to really take this to scale is now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. Jonathan. Sorry, this was great. I understand agroecological intensification is possible. We need to better measure its performances, especially in terms of environment. Once these performances are measured, they can be financed, and then they can bring a number of co-benefits that go beyond just agriculture and the environment. Thank you for these insights. I'll now leave the floor to Estrella Penunia from the Asian Farmers Association for Sustainable Agriculture. Mrs. Penunia, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gilles, and good morning or good afternoon to everyone. So I would like to share 3 messages today. First, how do we characterize the agriculture planet nexus? Currently, 90% of farms, forests, pastures, and aqua fisheries are worked on by family farmers, and they produce more than 80% of the world's food in value terms. However, 84% of all family farms are less than 2 hectares. These small-scale family farmers operate on only 12% of all agriculture lands, but still produce 36% of the world's food, and most of them are in the Asia-Pacific region. Despite providing critical nutrition and livelihoods to billions of people, family farmers, particularly the small-scale food producers, are amongst the world's poorest, hungriest, and most marginalized sectors of society. We as family farmers are challenged by climate change since agriculture relies so much on the weather, the climate, the soil, the environment. Too much rain, too much sun, too poor soil health can mean less flowering, less yields, increased pests and diseases, sometimes even total destruction of our crops, our properties, and even loss of lives. We also know that agriculture accounts for 31% contribution to GHG emissions, and that agriculture contributes significantly to biodiversity loss and poor soil health. However, we know that it is industrial agriculture characterized by monocropping, use of synthetic inputs, export orientation, exploitative agri and land use practices that contribute heavily to GHG and biodiversity loss. And this brings me to my second key message. Transforming agriculture and food systems. Can we go to the third slide? Next one, please. Yes, that one. So transforming agriculture and food systems such that it contributes to healthy people, a healthy planet, and healthy pockets, especially of family farmers, is what we need. A special focus on the women farmer, as she is the living nexus of agriculture, food, health and nutrition, water and sanitation, as well as energy, as the interconnections show in the work that we do as farmers, home managers, family nutritionists, and caregivers, as well as with young farmers, as they are the hope of agriculture. Family farmers organizations like us held at least 25 food system independent dialogues at national, regional, and global levels with IFAD support. And from our global statement, can we have the next slide? And from our global statement, we commit in transitioning to agroecological, regenerative, integrated, diverse, organic systems in farms, fisheries, pastures, and forests. The commitment in placing greater emphasis upon protecting biodiversity and preserving habitats, in promoting sustainable livelihoods. If we have one word to sum up the kind of production system that is equitable, nature positive, and net zero carbon, that will be agroecology. And agroecology needs an enabling policy environment and multi-stakeholder partnerships, and the current framework of the United Nations Decade on Family Farming can be the main instrument for bold actions. And this brings me to my third and final message. How can public development banks contribute to healthy people and healthy planet and healthy pockets of family farmers? In our statement, we ask that public capital be used to de-risk investments into agroecology and regenerative business models. We need financing for securing our rights to lands and to improving our lands. We need accessible, affordable, timely, and tailored credit mechanisms based on a thorough knowledge of our sector. We need financing mechanisms to protect us from the potential adverse events. Some of these can be mandatory risk disclosure, blended finance, repurposing subsidies to cover the cost of transition and enhancement of sustainable production and processing systems. And the risking also means supporting farmers' organizations and cooperatives to be strong institutions that can partner with public development banks as loan guarantors maybe, or as business development specialists, or as intermediators, interlocutors between family farmers and the banks. The SERA's 2030 report says that we need $33 billion a year to end hunger. Maybe, or is it possible? Or are you willing, public development banks, to reverse your current ratio of support to big companies versus small-scale farmers and contribute greatly to the establishment of a Farmers Resiliency Trust Fund and an Impact Investment Fund co-managed with FOs and cooperatives and dedicated to helping small-scale family farmers to mainstream sustainable agroecological production and stronger inclusion in sustainable food value chains. Thank you for your attention, and back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Estrella. This is great, and I think it's been delivered with such impact. Solutions are within the smallholding sector. We've heard solutions are within farmers' organizations, unions, including to negotiate and tailor specific credit instruments for smallholders. This is key. They are already, delivering incredible social co-benefits. You mentioned women, youth, families in great numbers. So I think one of the key, very strong messages is that solutions for ecology are within the smallholder sector in a very, very important and powerful way. Thank you again, Estrella, for this strong message. We're going now to switch our discussion to metrics. We've seen how important it is to measure the environmental performance of agriculture, how much carbon is emitted, what impact does it have on biodiversity, how sustainable it is for soils, etc. And the Food and Agriculture Organization has developed a number of important tools that really help us, both at farmers level, at bank level, and at policy level, to see a bit more clearly what are the key options. So I think we are going to have Mr. Nuno Santos, who is going to tell us a bit more of these instruments. But I believe that before that, we are going to watch a short video from FAO telling us about these instruments. Thank you.
The world is facing three simultaneous crises: climate change, biodiversity loss, and land degradation. And all three of these are actually interlinked. That is why urgent action is needed to address these crises by measuring and integrating the environmental impact of projects and investments in the whole sector. And this needs to be done in a simple, coherent, and scientifically robust way, aligning with the objectives of the UNFCCC, the CBD, and the UNCCD. FAO therefore developed a new geospatial app called Adaptation, Biodiversity and Carbon Mapping Tool, or simply ABC Map. And the app is based on Google Earth Engine and uses satellite imagery to holistically assess climate change adaptation, biodiversity, and climate change mitigation considerations over time. The tool provides users with several indicators for both the baseline and the project scenarios, using, among others, the methodology of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, GloBio, and the Ecosystem Service Valuation Database. As ABC Map is a mapping tool, the area and plots of interest are directly drawn onto the map, and the tool automatically calculates the impact of the project or investment.
Thank you very much to FAO for this this inspiring a little video showing that it's possible, actually, despite the complexity of carbon and biodiversity issues, to actually measure footprints. Nunes, do you want to tell us a bit more about this tool in a few minutes and how it's being used practically?
Hello, Gilles. Hello to everyone, and glad to be here. So I wanted to talk about the tool, but generally more about metrics, and to discuss how important this is and how this is essential for supporting the 2030 agenda and supporting decarbonization of agri-food systems. So I think the video illustrates this new tool, ABC Map, which is particularly interesting for countries to help them strategize, but also to monitor their policies. Can also be used in a range of applications, from reviewing the NDCs, but also to analyze the potential impact of projects and programs that can be financed by international financial institutions, by multilateral development banks. And so this is part of a range of tools that we actually use in our collaboration with development banks and with financial institutions, but also in our discussions with government. So tools, methods, governance systems, they're all part of FAO's, what we do in support to transition of agri-food systems towards more sustainable paths. So this includes the kind of normative support on information systems, measurement, traceability, but also looking at policies and strategic planning, and of course, technical support, de-risking, and tools are really important for all of this. I would like to take this opportunity, Gilles, to highlight just how important metrics are, and ABC Map is part of this range of metrics, because we are at a very important stage right now where the sector is and food systems in general are called for more action on decarbonization and taking a bigger role in securing biodiversity and also in having to adapt. But we know that metrics are in the sector and related to this sector particularly challenging, and this is for many reasons. As we phrase it in a publication that is now upcoming by FAO and the EBRD, we ask ourselves the question: how do you put a farm into an emissions test lab? The difficulties are really linked to the heterogeneity of agri-food systems, the complexity of individual value chains that can be linked to hundreds of thousands of smallholder farmers scattered around very different geographical areas. So just an example, how do you deal with soil carbon capture and how to measure it with appropriate accuracy in such different places and in a way that is practical enough to support action and investment. So we need to strike an appropriate balance in these tools between what's ideal in terms of accuracy from a scientific point of view, but also what's enough to just get public and private entities to start moving in the right direction. So, for example, to help investors understand the true risks, but also the true mitigation potential of specific investments. So metrics can be extremely important for countries to understand problems and identify solutions, but also it's extremely important for the private sector. And we've seen there's a lot being said about sustainable investment, but also with issues of transparency. So there's talk about greenwashing. So I think metrics are extremely important for investors, but also for companies once they start in a path that is built around carbon neutrality, that they're able to communicate on this and be credible. So in that respect, I would like to end with just saying that metrics would need to be accompanied by appropriate governance systems, so institutional setups that support the credibility of the use of these tools through certification, etc. And what we see at present, and it's part of some of the work that FAO is doing, is that there's a lot of confusion in certain respects, because there's a lot of definitions even just around carbon neutrality, net zero, etc., but also the application of metrics and we need to move towards greater standardization in order to unlock the potential of the sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nunes. So I think with the work of FAO, we see the growing capacities to actually measure the environmental performance of agriculture, while historically we've been very strong on measuring the production of agriculture and sometimes, in the better cases, the social dimensions of agriculture. And now we are adding this third dimension, which is absolutely key to achieve our triple bottom line. Now, what do banks, and especially agricultural development banks, do with all of that? With the importance of the stakes, with the key role played by the smallholders, with new emerging instruments, what do they make of that, and how do they actually direct their investment? That's what we want to hear now from three great colleagues. So first we'll leave the floor to Gustavo Montezano, the president of BNDES from Brazil, to hear his statement about financing sustainable agriculture. If you can show the video from BNDES, thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Gustavo Montezano, the CEO of BNDES, the Brazilian Development Bank. Although virtually, we're very glad to be here at Financing Common Summit. Public development banks definitely have the potential to materially contribute to sustainable agriculture and food systems. In BNDES case, for example, we are one of the main operators of the Brazilian public financing program. Through both direct and on-lending financing, in 2020, we disbursed almost 21 billion reais, or $4 billion, to the agro sector. BNDES also supports projects aimed at structuring production and the adoption of agroecological practice by low-income family farmers on a great basis. As an example, we have projects which provides water tanks for small farmers' food productions, with over 350 million reais, roughly $60 million, benefiting more than 125,000 families. We have set policies with better financial conditions for green projects, and also we have included our social and environmental corporate policy, the explicit mention of our attention regarding climate actions. Based on this long-standing experience, we understand that developing a common taxonomy for climate and biodiversity is a critical milestone in order to promote sustainable agriculture and food systems. The good news is that public development banks working together, such as we do through IDFC, we have all the conditions to make this happen, and this is into the club's priorities. Through an effective taxonomy, we're able to send price signals to the agro producers, promoting a climate and biodiversity-friendly output at the last mile. This will be materially benefit for Brazil, since you have one of the world's most strict framework for environmental licensing and conservation, preserving more hectares of forests for any hectare of planted area. A proper global taxonomy will reward our agro producers for maintaining this positive climate impact framework. One of the main challenges we face as a group is to develop innovative financial instruments, consolidating those biodiversity and climate assets alongside with private lenders. BNDES recently launched an ESG credit line, which aims to foster commitments on ESG issues to our clients through the reduction of interest rates when defined goals are achieved. We also intend to launch soon a new product line that aims to leverage resources to improve ecological restoration. We also has been supporting digital agriculture through the expansion of rural connectivity. Technology on the field definitely brings efficiency usage of resource and positively impacts climate and biodiversity. Only by exchanging experiences with other lenders to further improve our performance, and especially to speak the same language, we'll be able to leverage more green and inclusive investments to the agro sector. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. See you soon.
Thank you so much to Gustavo and to BNDES for these inspiring speeches, telling us the array of both technical and financial innovations that are at stake and that are taking place to finance the green within agriculture and to finance as well the social. I think, again, there are no one solution fits all, but rather an array of possibilities, especially granting green infrastructure, especially concessional credit for a small-scale farmer, especially linking interest rates with environmental performance have been, such examples that we have seen. It is my pleasure now to give the floor to Rossana Polastri, the Director for Latin America and the Caribbean at IFAD, to elaborate on these subjects. Rossana, the floor is yours. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting us to share with you our first experience in working with the Public Development Bank for designing a co-financing and adaptation and resilience project. IFAD has introduced important reforms to modernize our mode of working with our country clients. And right now we have to recognize that there is a clear need to boost and scale up international finance. Particularly economists, those that are from low and middle income countries are facing pressing challenges amid the COVID-19 pandemic. So fostering an inclusive and green recovery has become a top priority in many governments' agenda. That's the need to scale up international cooperation. From our side, IFAD recognizes and values the important role of public development banks in terms of public policy and also in catalyzing development finance. And as such, a proposal to allow subnational lending, which includes public development banks, was submitted by IFAD management and approved by the Governing Council early this year. So this was an important milestone in our new business model and a framework that allowed us to develop and design this project. This inaugural project I will share with you in a few minutes includes these modalities. It's the planting climate resilience in rural communities in the northeast of Brazil. This is a project that has an interesting architectural finance. It's co-financed with Brazil National Development Bank, BNDES, and also with resources from the Green Climate Fund, and of course with co-financing from beneficiaries targeted through the project. For us, this is a critical step, but a small one if one realizes that only 2% of climate funding goes to the small-scale agriculture. If you could go to the second slide, where I will describe the project structure. This project structure, which we are co-financing with GCF and BNDES, includes three components. The first component addresses the climate resilient productive systems, in which we are aiming to target 175,000 families. The second component addresses access to water. And the third component, which is an intersection between the two, manages knowledge and scaling up of productive practices. It is important to know that this project is using behavioral change in an integral way through the whole implementation. The project is it's based in the northeast of Brazil. This project focuses on women, youth, and traditional communities, and we're expecting to reach 250,000 poor agricultural families, or an estimate of 1 million people. Next, please. For us, the important question is if climate adaptation finance is viable. And I have to say that in this project, what we have is that the long-term effects of water and fertility management will make agroecological farming economically sustainable. But in the short run, we need to finance. We need an upfront investment and extensive technical assistance to mitigate risk during the transition phases that could last between 2 or 3 years. So the inclusion of the Green Climate Fund grant and the concessional element of the loan were critical factors to make this operation viable. How do we evaluate the viability of this project? Without the project, the areas will face land degradation, falling yields and farm revenues, and danger of desertification, which will be aggravated by climate change. With the inclusion of the project, we expect to see agroforestry and drought-resistant fodder production, build-up of soil carbon and moisture retention, rainwater storage for dry season, increasing yields and farm revenues, and a stable production system with higher biodiversity. All of this has been not necessarily an easy way to design and to measure. So from our point of view and our experience in designing this project and working with a public development bank, we believe that there is a need to develop more rigorous methodologies and evidence to ensure proper financial accounting of climate-related benefits. This is something that we have faced during the design of this project. We think that there is enough demand for financing for this type of projects from low and middle income countries, and there is a supply could come from public development banks. But for this to be timely, because we have to recognize that the design of this project took us a couple of years, there is the need of counting with the tools and metrics that we just heard from our colleague from FAO. This is all from my side, and thank you for inviting again us to share this experience. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Rossana, for these illustration and this example in northern Brazil that is quite impressive. With one key lesson is that it's possible to reach, impressive impacts, and there is need to measure them for sure. But 1 million person, 250,000 families all engage in some agroecology or sustainable agricultural practices. I think the solutions are at hand, and I think you stressed quite rightly that there is need for concessional money in there for sure to advance. Let's move on to our last example because time is running, and it is my pleasure to welcome Mariem Dkhil. I hope I don't pronounce your name wrong. Welcome again from the Crédit Agricole du Maroc, where you're responsible and director for sustainable finance. So please let us know a bit how, as a bank, you reconcile these planet issues with the farming issues.
Thank you, Gilles. Thank you first for your invitation. So I'm very happy here to present the experience of Crédit Agricole du Maroc, which is maybe one of the oldest agri banks in Africa. If we can have the presentation. So now we're talking about how we can support sustainable food systems, and obviously it's also about how we can extend finance to smallholder farmers. And the first point is the model that we have implemented in Crédit Agricole. It is based on the segmentation of the different type of farmers so that we are sure to involve all the farmers' scope. Next, please. As you can see, we have different channels to integrate the whole farmers. The traditional the traditional farming system includes the micro farms, but also the commercial farms. For this, we have microcredit institutions and the traditional banking system. Can we have the next slide, please? And what's really innovating in Crédit Agricole du Maroc is that we have created a Meso Finance channel that brings finance to non-bankable farmers because they have no collateral. So for this, we have an institution called Temwil Fillah that brings the financing. So as you can say on the right, we can have all the final beneficiaries that constitute the whole scope of farmers, whatever their type is, whatever their risk profile is, whether they have a land, a title or not, or a guarantee or not. So this is the first step. Once you have a system, such system in place, then you can mobilize funding in order to bring financing and find a way to encourage what's really important for you. And here we're talking about sustainable food and agriculture systems. So because it is something quite new and complex, it's really important to find concessional financing. And I am going to talk about one program that we have developed with the support of Agence Française de Développement. Next slide, please. The objective is how to help farmers and all the operators of the agri value chain transition from their current practices to new practices that include CO2 emission reduction, waste management, etc. So as you can say, we are targeting raw production, but also the food processing and the waste management, and financing energy efficiency and renewable energy investments, but also organic agriculture and recycling, waste recycling and valorization. So because it is something new and perceived as risky, you need investments, of course, investment loans, but you need also other measures. You need investment allowance. So the offer that we have put in place includes investment allowance of 10%, but also tailored technical assistance. The technical assistance helps the farmers and the operators to better understand what are the new practices and how they can incorporate them in their businesses, and also have a different feeling of, or at least reduce the risk that they perceive in making these investments. And what I would like to underline is, as we're doing this and as we are trying to create a new dynamic in the sector and creating a pipeline of green projects, we're also working on change management at the bank level, because we know very well how we can finance agriculture. We know how we can finance 1 hectare of tomatoes or 1 hectare of olive trees. But now we're talking about how we incorporate energy efficiency measures in that, how we can better advise our clients in doing that, and how we can give them the best advice. So it is also a change at the bank level. And we feel that we need more capacity building. This program has been also launched with a very intensive capacity building program, so that we can have all our teams and all our loan officers that can really embark in this cultural change. And I will end up with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mariem, for this. This was super interesting, and allow me to stress maybe 2 dimensions that I think are key. It's the need to de-risk innovative green finances, for sure, and this is, you know, a growing activity among public development banks with regards to climate and biodiversity impacts of our activities, and I think it's important to recognize this. And the second is indeed transformational change within organization to better account for environmental performance at large of what we finance. And this requires capacities, training, new organization chains sometimes. And I think it is quite an undertaking for sure for a lot of our banks. We've all been through that. Time is running out. We're left with 2 minutes. I will, we had two, I must first thank you all for your really interesting and complementary contributions. I will try to wrap up in a few sentences in a minute. Let me thank you again for your very rich contributions. We have we have two questions from the chat. There's one from a development bank in St. Lucia. It's important because national development banks are a key instrument, a key tool, a key channel, basically, to achieve the triple bottom line we're talking about this year. So the question is, how can we access funding as St. Lucia Development Bank to grant concessional funding to smallholders in St. Lucia? So I don't think I'll put that on the floor, but just to make you know that there was this question that was raised, and I think refinancing of national banks with regards to planet and farming input is absolutely key, and we should really pay an attention to that. And there was another question on how digitalizations can reduce the impact of agriculture on climate change. So I think Nuno, and sorry for mispronouncing your name again, Nuno did touch a bit about this. I think not to, because we don't have time, but I think digitalization indeed, and especially remote sensing and the ability to follow what happens at not just field scale, but as well at landscape scale or even regional scale, is absolutely paramount to better understand the environmental, especially carbon and especially biodiversity performance of agriculture, whether there be large scale or smaller scale. So to conclude, just a few words. I think we have heard, especially from Jonathan, that agricultural practices that are sustainable, agroecological intensification are there, and maybe they need to be better qualified in terms of their performance, but they are there, they are possible, and they are really part of the environmental solution to our nexus, including the social dimensions, extremely key. I think we've heard as well quite often that nothing will happen without a strong, reliable farmers' income. We've talked about the viability of solutions, and I think this is absolutely key, that whatever solutions that we push for better performance with carbons and with biodiversity in the farming sector, we will need concessional means, we will need de-risking, we will need access to credit, support as well from public policies such as advice, technical advice, training, research and development, strengthening of public policies and investments in rural area. And I think it's true, especially for the smallholders sector that Mrs. Penunia just stressed so eloquently. I think as well, another key message is that credit is essential, but it's possibly not sufficient. We really need enabling framework. We need enticing policies that really reward good behavior with regards to carbon and biodiversity issues. We need the right prices for agricultural goods, but we need as well some signals, some positive signals from public policies for the environments. We've stressed as well that metrics are absolutely essential. Historically, we've been very good at measuring how much a hectare produces of kilograms of this or that harvest, but we are less good at understanding what it does socially, which is very key, depending on different size and different models of agriculture. And we're even less good in measuring the environmental performance of different agricultural models. We're not starting from scratch, but there is a lot to do there, and we have really stressed the importance of metrics. We haven't talked enough, to my taste, of the social dimension of the nexus between agriculture and planet. Not everything is going to be resolved at field level. A lot of stuff is going to be resolved as well at landscape and regional level, i.e. social planning, i.e. trades-off and win-win between natural areas, forest area, agricultural areas. This is key. And this is something that is weaker within the agricultural sector and stronger within the conservation sector. But there's, I think, need for a dialogue there. And I think all these messages, to keep it short, are going to be very useful for the coalition of agriculturally oriented public development banks. These are 40 banks around the world that are entirely devoted to agriculture, and more than 72 other public development banks that encompass a large activity in the agricultural sector. So equipping all these banks, whether they be multilateral and especially at national level, because they're going to provide the key resources, especially for the smallholding sector that otherwise would have limited access to credit. I think this sector, equipping them with the right tools to finance an agriculture that meets the triple bottom line of caring for the planet, its climate, its biodiversity, and caring for the people, especially smallholders, and especially to produce and nourish healthily the whole of humanity, is really what we are trying to do. And I think it's really a challenging and a very exciting prospect for the coalition of PDBs working on agricultural finance to really remember this triple bottom line. So thank you again for all of you, dear panelists. It's been a pleasure. I hope we stay in touch. And I now close our session with a few minutes of delay, and sorry for that. Thank you again, and have a good day at the Finance in Common Summit.
Thank you very much.